Hello and welcome to Iowa Ideas. This is our 9th year of Iowa Ideas, an event that explores topics that are important to Iowans. We're excited for a great 2 days of discussion. The Gazette would like to give a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest, for their support of this event, ensuring it remains free to all attendees. Today, we will be discussing the role of teachers in education. My name is Grace King, and I'm the K-12 education reporter at the Gazette. Today, I am joined by our panelists, Darius Ballard, Chief of Human Resources at the Cedar Rapids Community School District, Coy Morcourt, Executive Director of the Iowa State Education Association, James Craig, Superintendent of the Cardinal Community School District, and Dr. Jay Pennington, Information and Analysis Services Bureau Chief at the Iowa Department of Education. Thank you all for being here today. Our audience can submit questions to our panel by entering them into the Q&A box or in the chat, and we will work them into our conversation. Today, we will be discussing Iowa teachers. Iowa had more than 1,000 unfilled teaching jobs statewide last year, and political pressures facing teachers continues to grow. What can be done to attract and retain more teachers into the field and to our Iowa communities? Panelists, let's just start by hearing how each of you began in your education journeys and your experiences. Darius, would you like to start us off?
Sure, thanks. So I started in 2007, not too long ago, as a teacher in Cedar Rapids at Jefferson High School. I stayed in that role, really transitioned into an instructional coach role, or we call them instructional design strategists. So a teacher leader position where I coached teachers to become better teachers. And then in 2016, I became an associate principal at Washington High School in Cedar Rapids, remained in that role until the infamous 2020 when I became the head principal of Washington High School. And then in 2023, I became the chief human resource officer for the district. So a lot of years in the classroom and then some years as an administration, and now finally transitioned to the central office.
I think it's pretty unique to have an educator in an HR position, would you say?
I would say so, especially in our state. I went to a conference not too long ago where it was much more par for the course in other states, but it's not necessarily the beaten path here in Iowa.
James, would you like to share how you became a superintendent?
Sure. So I graduated from college in 1998 in the last millennium. So this is my 28th year in education. I spent 17 years teaching instrumental music, and then this is my 11th year in administration.
And Jay, how did you find your way to the Iowa Department of Education?
Yeah, good morning. So my work in schools started about 30 years ago on the west side of Chicago, actually, working in a peer support program. And then the next year, my work was in Aurora, Illinois, working with students and families who were identified as having disruptive behavior disorders. So we did like a family support program that really focused on building support around the family in order to address the disruptive behaviors with that particular student. So creating those structures within the school, but also outside. I've worked in higher education. I worked at the University of Illinois at Chicago before moving to the University of Chicago, and then joined the Department of Education about 18 years ago as a bureau chief. More recently, I moved into the role of division administrator of the Division of Teacher Quality and Innovation. And in my role as division administrator, I oversee the educator quality team, which credits all the higher education institutes across the state. So, what are the quality programs that can bring a student across the pipeline to graduate? I also oversee the Board of Educational Examiners that really works to, ensure that those folks that are in classrooms are licensed appropriately. And I guess my role here on this panel is really to provide that macro level perspective around the role of teachers and the teacher pipeline.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. Coy, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, good morning. So I graduated around the same time Mr. Craig did in the 90s. from the University of Iowa, and then with a degree in elementary education, and spent a year after that as a paraeducator in a level 3 special ed classroom in Iowa City, which was a tremendous experience, and learned quite a bit about that. And then I went on to teach at East Marshall Community Schools for a short time. And then back in Iowa City, I taught 7th and 8th grade language arts at Southeast Junior High. About 20 years ago, I then went into union work, and I have been working with the Iowa State Education Association, representing our educators in our K-12 schools, AEAs, and community colleges all across the state since then. And for the last year and a half, have been in the role of executive director.
How has the teaching profession changed over the last, few decades? How is it impacting people's interest in a teaching career? Coy, I don't know if you want to start us off.
Sure, I can start us off. I think that since I started many years ago, quite a bit has changed. And when we listen to educators all around the state and about what keeps them in the profession or what's driving them out of the profession, or potentially, attracting new folks into the profession, it's really been a struggle recently with attacks on educators and professional respect. Our educators are trained to do what they do. They are the experts in the classroom. They work with in coordination and cooperation with folks like the rest of the, district administration, the Department of Ed as well. But oftentimes, I think recently, and what has changed from when I started, is that educator voice is not being listened to, heard, and taken into account just on the general broad level. And that's been a challenge to get folks encouraged to go into a career in education. That's just from our perspective, one of just a few of the little issues that I think are driving some of that.
I guess I would add to that, Coy, that everything has changed, but nothing has changed. So we still have to come into the classroom and educate our kids. We're still teaching math, English, social studies, science, our fine arts, our CTE classes. We're still doing all of those things. I think teachers are, and veteran teachers as well, but new teachers coming into the profession just aren't as prepared as they used to be to deal with all of the intangibles. They come in able to lesson plan, they come in able to start to work on classroom management, and they need experience. But just the different things that students bring with them into the classroom, as far as ACEs, the adverse child experiences, different food insecurities, that we have to work with in order to get those kids to their education. And I think also there are fewer people in education that are encouraging their own kids or their own students to follow them and take a path in education. I think some great steps have taken place in the last few years with working to increase teacher salaries and to make the profession more attractive. But I would agree with you that Coy, that the rhetoric has not been great, and I don't think really shows or stands up for what teachers do on a daily basis and how well they are doing and what work they do to improve and continue to grow and continue to support kids as we go along.
If I may, the only other thing I'm going to add, because I think you guys are crushing it. You're giving a lot of the meat there. The only other thing I can think of from Cedar Rapids stance, I was talking to one of my teacher leaders who works in my office now, and she started in '95. And in '95, her salary was $25,000. And when I started in 2004, for a brand new teacher, I was a brand new teacher. Ours started at 44. So to go from 25,000 to 44,000 in about 12 years is a pretty big change. And then from 2007 to 2024, we were struggling to get from 44,000 to 50,000. So it's also going into just how we can continue to grow that starting salary for folks, because there's just people wondering when they first start, is this a career I can do? Is this something I can actually have and have a successful life? I can afford to pick this choice. So when you couple, James, as you said, with the challenges that do exist at maybe a higher multitude than they did before, with still the expectation being the same in terms of helping every student access the learning and succeed at a very high level. But then at the same time, our rate in which we are able to compensate our workforce has taken some hits. It just makes the dynamic challenging to attract folks, retain folks, and in some ways engage folks, just when you're looking at the challenges as well as the supports that are coming their way.
James, you mentioned the new teacher minimums. Can you talk about how that has impacted your district? Do you think that is encouraging people into the profession or helping retain them?
I think for us, and specifically for Cardinal, this is not a broad statement at all. For us, it was a great thing for our teachers to receive that increase, as well as the district to receive supporting funds to pay for it. So those were both helpful. Our culture is incredibly strong here, and people have not gone on to other districts. So we're a 1A district on top of a hill in the middle of the cornfield in southeast Iowa. So we do not have a lot of things to attract young teachers here. We all talk about housing and childcare and things like that, but just the entertainment options, different things. We have some things. It's a nice place to be, but we're not a metropolitan area, and so younger kids today seem to want more of that, and understandably so. They want to have a life outside of school too. But our culture has really worked to keep people here, and so that the pay increase was much appreciated, and was just another step in getting support from the outside to build on what we already have developed internally.
So I just wanted to add a little bit to this conversation from a state level perspective. Grace, you started out with your question, like what has changed over the last couple of decades? And there's a couple of, I think, key policies that folks have mentioned early on that I just want to highlight. And in terms of the new minimums, 122 million has been put in the last 2 fiscal years to raise the minimum salary of starting teachers to 50,000 that Darius mentioned, and for career teachers to 62,000. So that's the most recent change to try to make the profession more attractive and long-term sustainable for that individual and their family. Additionally, Darius, you mentioned you were a teacher leader, and the individual that you spoke with was a teacher leader, and that system was created in 2013 and infused 150 million starting out, and it's continued to grow in order to create additional pathways for folks to stay in the profession, to take on additional roles, to work not only with kids, but also work with other educators in how to work better with kids. And all of this resulted in the peak. So 3 years ago, we had the most number of teachers in schools we've ever had, over 38,000 teachers in the state of Iowa. And that, workforce increased 9 percentage points in the total percentage of educators that exist. So we've got more teachers in schools in the last 3 years than ever before, working with kids and working with other adults. But that also, I think context is really important. Student enrollment has only increased 1% over that same period of time. So we're adding more educators, and we've got about the same number of students. So the number of folks to be able to support what's happening in schools and classrooms has also increased over that time frame.
Sure. I think James also mentioned like new teachers aren't coming in as prepared to deal with, I think you talked about variables. So these additional supports are needed as student behavior changes, as the social needs of students change. I guess, James, Darius, Coy, could you guys talk about that?
Well, I would start off by seconding what Dr. Pennington said about the Teacher Leadership and Compensation Program, or we call it TLC, has really helped mentor teachers, provide resources for English language arts teachers. Now we have a math interventionist this year. So those supports have been outstanding, and our student data assessment performance all continues to get better. And so that's been a very effective model for us.
Yeah, I also feel like I need to shout it out. Yeah, as a product of it, I don't think I'd be where I am today if I hadn't had that opportunity to be a TLC member or a teacher leader, because it gave me the opportunity to be seen as a coach. And we always want administrators who have done it and also know how to help people become greater teachers and not just be managers. So I do want to give that plug too. And thanks, Jay, for all the work you did or your team has done to try and maintain and stabilize that program. As part two, as you were talking about some of those challenges that kind of arise, I just think that as you look at our world today, there's just so much research going on about how our culture's changed. Our environment's changed, whether it be the advancements in technology, the social emotional implications of technology, as well as like just the social emotional environment that our kids are just growing up in nowadays. It's very different than it was 20 years ago in terms of how they interact with each other, things they say, just when they're available to each other and in what formats they're available to one another, and then how that plays out in our classrooms. I think there's a stronger desire for our teachers to no longer just be content experts. They can't just be people who teach the child their content. There's an expectation, there's a higher burden, a bigger responsibility to make more well-rounded students and more well-rounded kids, and making sure that whatever obstacle or barrier, whether it be their reading ability or some social emotional aspect that may play out outside of the classroom, doesn't deny them access when they get in the room. So how do we make sure our teachers are equipped to be able to have those conversations, get them to the right people? If it's major, if it's minor, give them the support they need in that moment so that they get that just-in-time intervention in that classroom, and that way they can be successful. And that's a challenge. I mean, like colleges and universities don't necessarily design in every setting all of those classes. So there's a lot of on-the-job training that is taking place in a lot of our districts across the state, because our job has not changed, as James said. We have to make sure that we are reaching all our students.
Yeah, I mean, I think as James mentioned earlier, there are a lot of external factors that have changed as well. And, I might be giving away the lead a little later, Grace, from what you may ask this question, but we have done some things to help, I think, but it's only so much we can do within our schools to control those external factors. One thing we do know, kids are coming to school more hungry. Food insecurity continues to rise. Poverty continues to be an issue across our state, not just in urban areas or suburban areas. And so kids come with a multitude of challenges. What we can all be proud of is that our educators go there every day. Folks like James and Darius and all the other educators go to school in their classrooms every day and continue to provide high quality education in our state. But when there are external factors, and Darius kind of alluded to these when we're talking about technology and other issues, I think it's important that we all come together to find solutions to help that. And I think one of those things that we did all came together and figured out over the last year was the electronic devices or cell phone bans during instructional time. I think that's been an important step to help get students in the mindset while they're in school to learn and try to limit those distractions or some of those things that we couldn't control before. So.
Sure. Yeah. And as we prepared for this panel, we talked about how that's a strategy being implemented to help attract, retain teachers, and also a strategy that kind of resulted from teacher input. We talked about teachers not having as much input maybe in their classrooms today as they did before. So how is this kind of helping add that input, and what are other ways that teachers are getting involved in their schools or in their districts in making decisions?
Well, locally for us, Grace, we survey our staff, which a lot of schools do. But what in 28 years that I've been in school districts, it's very rare that those surveys actually turn into action, and that the feedback is followed up on, things happen as a result of that. And so that's a major focus for us, that if we're going to take the time and make our teachers provide some feedback, then we're going to take action on that feedback. We're going to have conversations about what they talk about, and we're going to take action and implement things that we're able to do that make a positive difference, either for the staff or for the students, or both. That's an important feature. And so we have a labor management committee that I meet with that's made up of teachers. I have of the survey, we talk about all of the things that teachers put on there, and everything shows up on that list, from we would like better toilet paper to we need this storage system in our classrooms to help more efficiently use space, to we're talking about construction. Here are the things that we would like to see in our parts of the design. So we address everything. And I think that really matters to our staff and helps them. We have an 85% return rate on our survey, and that's insane. That you're lucky if you get 25 to 30% when you send something out. And so we continue to be very proud of that fact, that we communicate, we take what they say seriously, and we put into action everything that we can that makes sense for our students and staff.
Darius, I think the Cedar Rapids School District is also working on some new different ways of surveying teachers and teachers who are exiting your system as well. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So I've been using the phrase that retention is the new recruitment, pretty big here in our district, and so we've been really trying to focus in on specifically what are the keys to why people are showing up every day. And so we've been doing a milestone survey, the milestone surveys for all of our educators at the 5, 10, 15, you name it mark. And it's really an engagement survey. So it's looking at what I've kind of classified as the 3 S's: say, stay, and strive. Are people saying the things we want them to be saying, not saying the things we don't want them to be saying, not because we're forcing them, but hopefully they're feeling those ways. Are they wanting to stay, and what are those reasons why they want to stay? And then striving, how are they feeling about their current role? Are they able to grow into it and fully assume it well? And then from there, do they feel like there's a passion and a pathway to go toward that next step? So we've been doing that for the last couple of years. We're dovetailing that more with a more comprehensive communication plan this year, because the big bugaboos for us are around behavior, which is not new. I think most educators have been saying that since the sun came up the first time on the first school in America. And so behavior is a big part for us. And then just having those channels of feedback as well. So like James brought up his team, we have one, it's called our resolution team in Cedar Rapids. We've had it for almost, 25 plus years at this point. And we're proud to say we've not had a single grievance in that entire time, because that's one of the things that it strives for. But we're also just trying to look at those who may not be plugged into their union, those who may be questioning, maybe they don't know, like giving everyone that opportunity to have a voice in the process, so we can develop some smart things. And then the last thing I'll plug for us is we've started this thing called change management processing here in Cedar Rapids, because as we know in Cedar Rapids and really in all of our districts, there's a lot of change. Some things are required of us, some things we think we need to do. And there's always that push and pull of how many things you can manage as a change right now, and whose voice gets to be involved in the change as we make the change. And so we've tried to really standardize that process so people can be aware during discovery, they can have voice during the planning, they can help us monitor as we execute, and then they can celebrate those results as we do it. And every voice gets picked. We try and send it out to every part of our population to be a part of it. And we think comprehensively, when you look at all those things, that should help with that Say, Stay, Strive, because we're certainly trying to find as many avenues for folks to feel like they have a voice in the process.
Yeah, I would just add, just piggyback on what both Darius and James said. I mean, it echoes what I said at the beginning, which is when you provide educators a voice at the table and a seat at the table, they value that. You're valuing their expertise. And I think these are two districts that are good examples of where they do value input from their staff. They are, I think those places, both Cardinal and Cedar Rapids strive to not be top down, but to be, classroom up, and uplift the voices. Who better knows what the needs of their students are than the teachers and the paraeducators who literally spend hours with them every day. And, through labor, whether it's a labor management committee, whatever form it may be, that is replicated in a lot of places across the state. And that is a vital piece to retaining educators, I believe, to ensuring their voice is heard.
I just want to remind our audience, if you have any questions, please message those in. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut anyone off.
No worries, Grace. I was just going to piggyback on what Coy was saying, and research shows, whether we're looking in the education field or outside the education field, that there are critical pieces to retention, and those include things like burnout, efficacy, and climate and culture within the building, and so those are critical elements, and I commend the work that these two districts are doing to try to keep that retention high. But I also think data is important in terms of what does this really lead to? And so when we look at retention, and this is year-to-year retention, the retention rates are virtually the same that they were a decade ago. So the teacher educator retention was 91.3 a decade ago, and it's 91.2 in the most recent year that we have data available. So certainly, these are great examples of how you support educators on the, in terms of strategies to create that positive climate and culture. But at a macro level, that's kind of what the numbers show in terms of overall retention statewide.
Thanks for that context. Could you add more about, we started talking about what the teacher shortage in Iowa looks like. How many open teacher positions do we have right now, and how does that compare across the U.S.?
So just to provide, again, context, the department collects annually from school districts, and we just opened our latest collection for fall of 25 last week. But in our fall bed staff collection, we collect the number of unfilled positions at the start of the school year from the prior year. So if last spring, as an example, you had 5 special education positions that went unfilled, you would say I had 5 special education positions unfilled. So we get that data directly from districts. And the result was that there were 661 teaching vacancies reported by Iowa districts, which is approximately 1.7% of our total workforce. So less than 2% of vacancies statewide, and that's less than the national average, which is about 3%.
Coy, what does that look like in reality for our Iowa schools?
Yeah, and while those numbers have improved, I think, from last year, it's still a challenge, and 661 is still too many. We have districts across the state that literally have 0 applicants for a secondary science position. And James might be able to share some better examples of what he's faced with this. We're also faced with, and I've talked to district administrators who will say that, I used to get 36 applicants for a position. Now I'm getting 2 or 3. And puts districts in very difficult situations. But really, what it really means in a lot of places is if you cannot find a qualified person to fill a position like these, perhaps 661, students don't, public schools don't turn students away at the door. They're still coming. So the rest of the staff and educators have to pick up that slack and do that. And that's why until we get that number down to 0, we should not be complacent and think that, and nobody is, but we really need to continue to strive to get that number down to as little as we can, because we say this for a long time, but a 4th grade student, as an example, they only get 1 shot at 4th grade, right? So if there's, we don't have, or they only get 1 shot, and we can't find a music teacher in the elementary, all those kids are not going to get the high quality music or whatever subject it may be for that year. And so we deserve to do everything we can for our students to try to continue to get that number of vacancies down.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, Coy, that when you talk about some of the different positions, I think a great change has been the creation of the CTE authorizations, so that folks that teach business, industrial tech, agriculture education, or family consumer science can come into the profession with enough experience to be able to fill those spots. And I know there's advocacy happening right now to expand that to fine arts, so that if you have a music teacher or a piano teacher or somebody that has music experience that could come in and teach, they can get a pathway to licensure also. So there's also the RAPL program and some other alternative ways to get into licensure. So those things have helped. And we would encourage that to continue to grow. As a former band director, there's plenty of good people out there that lead church choirs and teach piano lessons and do private instrumental teaching that could be good additions to the staff. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I mean, from a state perspective, there's a number of activities. Superintendent Craig just mentioned that career and technical authorization, in order to sort of plug and address the vacancies, to try to get that 661 down to as low as it possibly can. So those include like a teacher intern program, the alternative pathway, the RAPL program that Superintendent Craig mentioned, things like the native language teacher authorization. So those that are having difficulty, getting folks to teach world languages. There's a pathway for folks that have a bachelor's degree and are native in a different language to come in and sort of fill that vacancy. things like reciprocity with other states. And the last one, and there's more that I'll mention, but try to be brief, is the TPRA program, which is a para registered apprenticeship program, in which the state put up, 49 million in order to create a pathway for folks, either paras to become teachers, or those wanting to go directly into the teaching field. So that really entailed basically paying for tuition and ancillary fees so that we can get more folks into the profession, and that resulted, that program itself, in over 1,000 new folks somewhere in the pipeline to becoming paras or teachers. So just a few examples of what we're doing at the state level to try to address those vacancies.
And I would add that the TPRA program has been wonderful. We have 5 paras that are completing through the first round of that grant, and 4 of them are special education, and 1 is, I believe, social studies. So, and we're going to be able to hire those people because the need is there. So there are things happening that are having a positive impact.
If I may, the only other thing I want to contribute, Jay, the other one that you didn't say, I know you were trying to be brief, is also the master authorization, which also exists too, where people who have that additional, that master's level in a certain content area can also be authorized. And that has saved us quite a few times already in the last couple of years. And James, I'm right with you. I think we've hired about 35 or 40 TPRA paras over the last 2 to 3 years, which is spectacular. The only other thing I was going to mention, and it kind of spoke to what Coy had suggested already too, or intimated, was that there's some noise in the data that's hard to get, where we do collapse classes. You work in that noise so it doesn't appear as though it's a vacancy anymore, because we get very, very creative, or this opportunity goes away, but they're going to have to go into this environment. In some cases, when you're looking at vacancies and it's July, or it's vacancies in late June, and you're going to have to make those tough choices. And I've noticed since I've been in my HR role for the last 3 years, we're having to have more of those tough choice conversations than when I was a teacher back a decade ago.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add, if we're talking about pipeline and really how to get folks in that pipeline, as Jay was referring to, we're very excited at ISEA to be investing in the Educators Rising program, which is a program at the high school level to get students who are interested in careers in education, some exposure and experience to that in a formal program. It's similar to perhaps an ag program, an FFA, a BPA, business professionals program, those types of things. So we have been able to partner with the University of Iowa the last 2 years, hold a statewide conference and competition, and that program will be expanding, I think, to more districts as we continue to work with districts across the state to really get folks, students who are at that high school level up to do that. And that was one of the other small little pieces of the TPRA as well. An ancillary of that was high school students interested in being paras that Jay kind of mentioned as well. And that is another way to get folks into the pipeline and dedicated to a career in education.
Darius, is Cedar Rapids using the Educators Rising program or another program? Are you guys starting that process?
Great question. So we're doing a little bit of a couple of options. So yes, in a nutshell, like Coy said, we are very proud to say that we are also going full bore into Educators Rising. We've got a cohort already here in some of our schools. We just haven't been able to fill it all the way out yet. And we're hoping to get there before the end of the year. Simultaneously, we've offered some classes. And so we're kind of using our Educators Rising as kind of our after school activity for students. And then they can also take the during school opportunity. And so you'll have some students who will take just the after school, some during school, some will do both. It'll kind of be based upon how they fit into their schedule. We're launching kind of a big college and career readiness pathway and academy initiative in our district. And so This may be an in addition for some students. This is the plan A for some students, and we want to give them both in our school district.
Go ahead.
Well, just one thing I want to add too. I think another important source to look at teacher pipeline is really, who's in education, like the prep programs today. And again, I'm very data driven. So these are the most recent, data points that we have. And there's really two that I think are important to look at. And again, I'm looking at a decade view. So we have, in the most recent year, 7,586 folks actively enrolled in a teacher prep program, which is up about 500 more than it was a decade ago, which was 6,913. So like how many are actively pursuing that degree is a really important data point. And then the other one that I just want to mention too, and that is the total number of graduates statewide. So those that will be applying to be, new teachers get that 50,000 new salary minimum. So the most recent year we had 2,159 graduates, which is the second highest number of graduates that has existed over that 10-year window. So there's a lot of interest in the field. And while that has gone up and down over that period, the numbers are pretty strong over the decade.
And I would add too, the messaging on this is very important, because what the general public hears is that there's a teacher shortage and we're just complaining because we don't have enough teachers. So I think it's important to point out that from the Department of Education to ISEA to our student groups to the college and prep programs, there are a lot of things being tried. And so many of our viewers are probably familiar with the book, The No Complaining Rule. So you can't complain unless you bring solutions to the table to try to fix it. And there are people working and providing solutions to try. And it's coming from all different aspects of the education community, not just top down from the department or just one person over here throwing something out. So there's a lot going on to try to fix this issue.
We're talking a lot about growing students into teachers who are right here in Iowa. What do those efforts look like? Are those efforts important to try to attract people from outside the state to come here and teach?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Darius probably has most experience with this, recruiting, and maybe James. But I would add that that's an important aspect, Grace. And also an important aspect is those 2,159 folks that Jay mentioned are graduating. We need to retain them in our state to stay here and teach. And I think we don't have a lot of data on what we're exporting for those students, and that's an important piece. So we really do need to ensure that we're not only recruiting out of state, we're retaining our graduates in state to help address that situation.
Yeah, I would say from the recruitment standpoint, it can be, I'll just say, a challenge. It's we're doing those things that we used to do before, going to those college fairs and posting our jobs online and having partner sites scrape them and drop them onto theirs just in case people don't go straight to ours. We're doing those sort of tips and tricks that we used to do many moons ago. But like Corey said before, instead of having 25 people apply, you're having 4. And that just makes it a little bit more challenging. And of course, if there are times when you get those 4 that apply, someone may have done an interview at cross town, cross district, and before they get to that school where you need them, that 4 has gone down to 1. And so now then you're challenged as an organization. Can this person really fit? Can they be a success? If your answer to that is no, well, what do you do instead? And so we're doing a lot of those conventional things. We're also trying to think more conventionally, but I also think that some of that work that Jay talked about in terms of kind of building our pipelines is critical. If we get people who have gone in our classrooms and written on the board as a student and raised their hands in that classroom, Now on the other side, calling on students for the next generation, they know our district. We don't have to convince them that the weather is much better than they think. They know the weather. They know what's going to feel like in the classroom, or how great Don Bosco sticks are. So anything we can do to get people to stick around and stay, and make that transfer from being a student to now a professional, and then having a pathway to help them grow as professionals, is where we've got to invest our time, energy, and effort, because getting those outside folks is really challenging, because you've got to overcome so much of that unknown before they'd even want to work in our districts. And we can do it. It's just easier to keep who you have.
And we're sitting here in an urban school district areas, but the vast majority of Iowa schools are in increasingly rural areas. And there's a huge challenge of how do you attract people to those communities?
Yes.
Yeah, I would be happy to kick in here, because the messaging and the advertising that we invest in to try to get the word out about how great a place Cardinal is for teachers to work and support staff to serve is pretty incredible. I haven't used the Bosco sticks; those are delicious, and we're gonna work that in. But it's difficult because you're recruiting from across the state. And when we talk about trying to bring in from out of state, I came from my last school before Cardinal was in Northwest Iowa. We would go to Sioux Falls to their college fair or their job fair because we were right across the border. So there may be, and we got a couple of candidates out of that. Down here, where we're at in Southeast Iowa, we're just far enough away from Missouri and Illinois that it's not as realistic to go there and have candidates that will want to move up. Now, I think education in Iowa is great, and I think Cardinal is better than any other district they're going to find in Missouri and Illinois, but I'm biased. Bringing them here, and again, housing, childcare, the things that they need to move here, that's a major problem across the state, not just in our areas. So there's those factors that you have to work in that aren't education related. We've got small class sizes. We've got lots of opportunities for kids. We have a large open enrollment in population because people think Cardinal is a great place to be. But if I can't live there and I have to drive 45 minutes to get there, am I really going to take that job? So I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but we have to make sure that the messaging and the advertising that we have to do is much more significant than it was several years ago. And back when I started, I'm sorry, I'm dragging on here, but when I started, we were always worried about losing teachers to Cedar Rapids, to Des Moines, to Waterloo, to wherever. But now that everybody is having that conversation. We don't want to lose teachers to anybody because nobody can find the things to fill those high need areas. High need used to be special education and science, maybe math. Now it's everything. And I think that's where the 600 and some unfilled spots, it's just, do we have the right people to fill those spots that are graduating and staying in state? And we've got to, as Coy said, we've got to work on making sure those folks that are graduating are staying here.
Yeah. And for our audience here, if you guys are interested in hearing more about where specifically the teacher shortages are when it comes to like special education and other really specialized topics, we are discussing that at my next panel at 11:45. So be sure to tune in there. Thank you, James, for that insight.
I did want to just add something to what Superintendent Craig said, and I talked about this in terms of a little bit earlier, and that is, reciprocity. So if you have a teacher license in another state, we will honor that here in Iowa. And having those new minimums really, I think, helps make that more attractive, particularly both statewide, but $50,000 at a minimum goes a long way in some communities more than others. And the other thing that I think is important is that in the last 5 years, the number of licenses that we've issued to out-of-state applicants has increased 59%. So we're trying to put policies in place to, again, help address the vacancies that exist and close the loop there.
Yeah, the other thing I would add, that one of the things we're not doing a lot yet in this state, but other states have picked up on this, is figuring out ways to pay student teachers and place them in a role. The TPRA, the Registered Apprenticeship Program, is kind of like that, but we have, I've got some union leaders and some college campuses of ours who are being paid by school districts in Illinois to come there, student teach, and then they are promised, they get a job, and they pay their housing, they pay, so there are some other ideas. We're just in much competition with other states as we are in state as well, because as Jay's mentioned before, it's a national problem, a national issue, this shortage. The other thing I think that's difficult, frankly, not to be too political about this, but when we have a lot of rhetoric tearing down teachers and educators in our state from some elected officials in our state and nationally, that's not helping. When people don't want to come here or stay here, if educators aren't respected for what they're doing. So it's vitally important for all of us, whether it be elected officials, whether it be those of us in schools or our communities and parents, to support our public schools and be involved and do what they can to make sure that everybody understands the quality schools that we have in the state.
And student teaching, to go along with what Coy was saying, the student teaching piece is like a registered apprenticeship. It's like an internship. And so being able to pay people to do that, right now, and of course, I graduated almost 30 years ago from college, but student teaching is a semester that you take that you pay for. It's part of your program. And so the teacher pays for that opportunity. And in the private business world, those apprenticeships exist so that people can get paid to be trained, to come into the profession. So I think that's a great idea to help motivate some folks and get those teachers into our schools, so that more of us can have those student teachers and support them, and they can see what's out there.
Yeah. As we talk about funding and supports, are there other supports and funding streams that are needed in Iowa to better support teachers in their classrooms? I think about like mental health supports, not only for teachers, but also for students. Just those social services that schools are expected to deliver today. How could we implement them better in our schools so that teachers aren't taking on those burdens?
Yeah, I mean, I think folks like Darius and James have huge challenges on their plates with that. We have a decade of chronic underfunding in the state for public education, period. We have never seen a decade with funding levels and new investments in our public schools this low. So, that forces districts to make very difficult decisions when they may say, yes, I agree, those are all great ideas. We need to be able to prioritize those and fund those. But in the end, districts have to make difficult decisions to provide core services and support for students. I think the challenges with the reforms to the AEA system have not helped that, very bluntly, where a lot of districts had full support from their AEAs, and then we went and changed a system that really wasn't broken. So there's a lot of change and churn in the system right now that we don't know how it's all going to work out. But I don't envy our administrators and school boards in trying to figure out how to put all the pieces together to provide the most support we can to students.
Yeah. When you talk about AEAs, rural school districts, which again are the majority of our state, are paying more for fewer services. And that includes fewer services for teachers to support them in their classroom, for them to get additional learning opportunities so that they can better support their students in their classroom. I've reported on this, and it will continue to be a challenge.
Yeah, and I would jump in here to say that the change in the AEA, as we're living that every day and working through how that's developing, I wouldn't say we're paying more. We're paying for what we didn't have to before. I think that's a big difference, because before we just got a lump of money that flowed through us to the AEA because they can't levy property tax. So that's how they were funded. Now they get less. So it's less in our overall budget that we have to count for, but we never had it to begin with. It was always flow through. So now that they're pay for service, fee for service programming, we have to decide, okay, we get a portion of money that we can allocate to those services. But then if we need more, we have to use money that we used to not have to do that. We partner from the mental health standpoint. We partner with a lot of different outside resources. There are just things that schools are not set up to deal with and to provide services for. And when we reach that point, we are partnering with local mental health professionals. We have social workers that we both share with the AEA and work with a local provider to have them come in. We've tried to get, as many school districts have, get providers to come in to work in the district, and so that students don't have to leave school for those appointments, help try to reduce absenteeism while providing the services that they need. And that's another thing that we appreciate, the teeth that the state put into the chronic absenteeism law. We saw a 17% reduction in chronic absenteeism from 2 years ago to last year, and that's a lot of that credit goes to that law. But the partnering is very important, and telehealth services and different things. And Darius, you probably have a lot more going on there, just with more kids and more staff in a bigger district. But that partnering is essential for us to get people the services they need that we aren't equipped to provide.
Yeah, I would say really fast, and now I'll get out of your way, Jay. Yeah, so we have a nice ecosystem of partnerships, and we've tried to be as savvy as we possibly can to bundle individuals who are working with our students with having some additional staff services as well, because we know this can be a challenging career at times for folks, and they need folks whom they can talk to as well. And so we want to make sure that we aren't just taking care of our kids. Of course, the kids are why we're here every day, but we want to take care of our staff as well. I would say the biggest thing that we've known, even though we've got telehealth options in about half of our schools, we have additional mental health support for at least our students there, and our staff will have some work. They do some group-based things. They do one-on-one things in some of our schools. Of course, our counselors take on some of that work as well in our buildings. But in addition to all of those things, we still are saying quite a bit like, man, I really wish we could, instead of this person being here 2 days a week, I wish we could have them for 4. I wish we could have them for 5, because there's even more. There's a greater need than we can supply still. We're thankful for where we are, and we can see the dividends that it's paying, and we're thankful that we've got those partners in our community. But the need is so great, we could always use more.
So I just wanted to go back a little bit and again level set in terms of this conversation around money and funding, and certainly it matters. It all really matters. But again, context matters too, and that is in fiscal year 25, Districts budgeted a total of $7.4 billion statewide across a number of programs. As an example, 400 million just went to support teacher salary supplement and again, raising teacher pay. An additional 189 million was in the teacher leadership and compensation program. And, 56% of the total general fund was spent on education in Iowa. So certainly money matters, but just so people have a context of how much money we're actually talking about and where the state is investing.
Well, thank you all for those thoughts. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I have to conclude our conversation, but thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, ITC Midwest, for their support, and to our panelists for their insight and expertise. And thank you to our audience. Have a great Iowa Ideas.